Hey, South Paul 1. Um, when you're studying Bible history, um, lower criticism, there are certain ways to figure out the age of a book, like where it came from, what time it came from, who wrote it. Uh, a lot of the books of the Bible, they're going to have the author written right there in the book. But the way to test it to make sure it's when it came from when it says it came from, or like in the case of Daniel, where it came before Alexander the Great. The way to test these things in lower criticism is that there are internal evidences for one. And an example of internal evidence would be if you found a ship buried at sea and they found coins inside it from 1789 leading up to 1830. Well, then you know that the ship sank in 1830 or later. It couldn't have sunk in 1789 because it has coins from 1830. That's an internal evidence. There's things like that are applied to the books of the Bible. And then there are things like if people are mentioned in the book and then they match real known people and their records, like when there's kings listed in the Bible, and then they'll go and they'll look, and yes, those kings did reign during those time periods. Um, but the other way would be like with some books of the Bible is they'll say, well, the earliest copy we have is the year 300, and this book is supposed to have been written in 100. Well, obviously it wasn't written until 300. No, no. The books of the Bible were used, and they would wear out, and they would get thrown away, burned, and so they would get replaced with newer versions, the same exact copy, just a new copy. But the way to know when it came from is like if it says it came from the year 100, and let's say around 105, you have an early church bishop. This is before Roman Catholicism comes along. You have an early church bishop, and he's quoting from a certain book, and he's matching the book of the Bible. And he says, I'm just making this up. Let's say he's quoting from the book of Acts, and he's in a certain year near to the time of the writing of Acts. Well, then you know that it can't be hundreds of years later if he's quoting from it. So this is how, in lower criticism, how you learn when books of the Bible were written. Daniel was written before Alexander the Great was a king, and you keep referring to the vagueness. I guess the vagueness is maybe because you're not familiar with some of the issues that I'm talking about Alexander the Great and Nebuchadnezzar and things like that. But there are details uh, in that dream of Nebuchadnezzar's. There's details I think, in other parts of Daniel and certainly in other books of the Bible that will give details about a king or something like that. And those details will match that particular king that it's prophesying. Um, so like with the dream that we were talking about, Daniel 2, where Nebuchadnezzar is dreaming, he's the golden part, and then it degrades in quality. And if you look, that's what happened in history. That's just one of many examples where the quality of the kingly world kingdom degraded. One of them, I believe, you'll find is the Roman Empire, and one of them is going to happen, the revised Roman Empire. And I don't think Daniel 2 is the only one. It seems like there's at least one other part of the Bible that gives even more details about Alexander the Great. I don't remember where it is. If there's a commenter here, maybe one of you will remember where it is. But even down to, like, there's some examples where an animal will be represented by a certain king that came in the future, and that king was known to be represented by that animal. Kind of like how Russia is represented by a bear. But I don't remember all the details. I really don't want to do all the research. It's been decades since I studied it and had to do schoolwork on it, or listen to a sermon or DVD or something where I learned some of these things. I did it through schooling, probably in basic Old Testament survey, and then in other things involving church history. So it's a treasure trove. But you say that the only thing that would convince you of God is if he came down and talked to you. Okay, but in a purely humanistic sense, couldn't you then say, well, I hallucinated? Somebody put mushrooms in my ice cream. Couldn't you say that? I mean, there's so much evidence. I keep asking you if you've read the entire Bible. Um, it's either Isaiah or Job, I think, where the Bible talks about the earth hanging upon nothing, that it hangs upon nothing. That's true. Where'd they get that idea? Um, we're all of one blood, and we are. We have different blood types, but we're all of one blood. The Bible talks about, um, was it springs, the bottom of the sea, something? I forget exactly the verse. I've mentioned it in other videos. And there are, which wasn't discovered till 1965 when we had vehicles that could go down that deep. I mean, there is so much in the Bible that is unexplainable from a human perspective. The Bible, like the sun has a circuit. How'd they know that? The sun does not sit stationary. It has its own circuit in the universe. How'd they know that? And there's so much. It's not a book you can read once and then you've understood it. It goes on and on and on and on. So I read 2 to 4 chapters a day, have done so for decades, still learning stuff all the time.